The Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business Podcast brings you a unique view of Mesa through its vibrant business community and the subjects that are important. The podcast is produced in the Mesa Chamber of Commerce Media Studio, sponsored by the University of Phoenix. Our podcast is hosted by Mesa Chamber of Commerce CEO Sally Harrison. Please enjoy this episode of the Mesa Chamber Inside Business Podcast.
Hi, I'm Sally Harrison, President and CEO of the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, and today we are in our podcast studio with my friend Rich Adams, who is running for Councilmember of District 1 for the City of Mesa. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here too. So, recently, just last week, the Chamber Board approved a slate of candidates that we would endorse, and you are our candidate that was chosen for District 1. So let's talk about that.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So why are you running for City Council?
Well, first of all, it's an honor to have been selected by the Chamber for the Chamber's endorsement. I very much appreciate that. The reason I'm running is back in November or early December, I looked around and I really saw no one running for the District 1 seat that I could support. And I'm also running because I'm very invested in Mesa. I've lived here 61 years and, I'm an old guy. But, I think it's important that we keep the city in its lane. And what I mean by that is we have a charter. And it tells us what the council and the mayor and the city can and cannot do.
Right.
And every once in a while that lane gets jumped a little bit. So that's one of my hot button interests. I think the city needs to stay in its lane. I think the citizens need to be always first.
Yes.
I'll give you an example if I may.
Sure, please.
We promoted a project a few years ago called Mesa Plays. And we had all the economic impact studies done. It was a great deal, looked like a winner. It went to the voters, and the voters said no. And that was it.
Yeah.
So when we go to the voters and they say yes, that means the light is green. When they say no, the light is red, and we stop. We don't look for ways around it.
Well, there you go.
Those are some of my reasons for running.
Well, thank you. And thank you for running, because, there's a lot of activity here in Mesa, and we don't always have a lot of people stepping up. So talk about your 3 top priorities, and why are they your priorities?
Well, what they are is public safety, fiscal responsibility, and integrity and transparency. I think public safety more or less speaks for itself.
Sure.
That means it's safe to take the kids to the park. It's safe to bike down the street. It's safe to go out at night and enjoy all the amenities here in Mesa without fear. I think we're blessed to have one of the finest law enforcement agencies in the country here in the Mesa PD.
We absolutely are.
And we need to maintain that. So that is, without public safety, which relates to quality of life, it all stops. Nobody wants to move to an unsafe community.
Sure.
And site selectors, people who make decisions on locating businesses here, they look at that stuff.
Sure.
So that's public safety. Fiscal responsibility. Elected officials are stewards of the public trust, and that means stewards of the public money. We've had recent examples where perhaps public money wasn't so responsibly spent. And the response to that in certain circumstances was not what it should have been, which doesn't relate to integrity or transparency. Everything government does should be crystal clear and available for public inspection.
Right.
There are no acceptable reasons for hiding things, hiding the ball, trying to be less than transparent while trumpeting all day long how transparent we are. There's no question here. Transparency is either there or it's not.
Well, I agree. I know you have 3 candidates that are also running for this seat on council. What sets you apart from your fellow candidates?
Well, and thank goodness we do have this much interest in this seat.
Yeah.
I think it's great that people are willing to engage and put themselves out there. What sets me apart is simply experience. 40 years of experience in volunteer service to the community right here in Mesa. Several boards, most significant of those, planning and zoning, 2.5 terms. 14 years on the Economic Development Advisory Board. I had the privilege of chairing what we call the Falcon Visioning Commission, which put together a comprehensive business development plan for Falcon Field Airport, one of the busiest municipal airports in the country.
And it is.
I served on the Greater Phoenix Economic Council Board. I believe my experience is head and shoulders above my opponents when it comes to community involvement of a broad-based nature. I'm not a singular focused candidate. I think my experience is broad and has involved a lot of policy setting, quite a bit of recommendation work to council, and I do believe it stands head and shoulders above my competition.
Thank you for that. How would you feel about Mesa supplementing its general funds with a primary property tax instead of utility revenues?
I am adamantly opposed to a primary property tax, and I've been opposed to one since I was old enough to vote. I think it was with good reason that our city fathers so many years ago wrote into the charter that we can't do that. And there again, let's not mess with something that isn't broken. Private property rights are sacred. And when you start imposing taxes that can ultimately result in someone losing their property if they run into a financial difficulty, I can't support that. You know, it's interesting. I was asked a question in another interview. The interviewer said, now that the rental tax will be eliminated, what would you propose to replace that revenue in the community? And my response was twofold. I said, number one, I haven't the slightest idea yet, but I'm willing to explore just about any opportunities that we can garner from the business community. And the other thing is, I think we need to be very careful in our planning and in our attraction of retail business, which generates transaction privilege tax. So we need to be a business-friendly community, which
Absolutely.
the Mesa Chamber is a great advocate for.
Very
Thank
important
you.
to us. Yeah. Well, so let's talk about the 2050 general plan. It was recently approved by the City Council to be put on the November 2024 ballot. So coming up, I mean, November's like right around the corner.
Almost here.
How do you feel about the 2050 general plan? I know a lot of work has been put into this by you, but by lots and lots of people in the community. I think the city's done a great job of really putting it out there and asking for feedback from people in our community.
Sally, I think the group that worked on this plan has done a very admirable and comprehensive job. I could reflect back on the 2020 general plan committee or commission that I served on, and while I think we attempted to do the same outreach, I don't think we got as deep into the community as we did. Speaking from the Economic Development Advisory Board perspective, which I served on at the time, we were engaged and asked for our input. And bless Bill Honsaker. Bill knows more about commercial property in Mesa than anybody, I think, and he was very helpful in providing feedback on proper land use designations that would fulfill our economic development goals. So I think this group has done a wonderful job. I think that you're never going to make everybody happy.
Sure.
I think they've done a good job of trying to protect the character of neighborhoods, which is something that's foremost in my mind.
Sure.
So
especially in the Lehigh area, it feels like.
We have a hidden gem in Lehigh, and I've gotten to know so many of those folks down there. And
Sure.
Their way of life is precious, and it needs to be preserved. And I think the folks have done a good job.
Great. So what's your position on renewable energy and on water conservation? Obviously, water has been a big topic, not just in Mesa, but in the state for a long time now. And it seems like in the last year, we've made some big headlines. Talk about that.
Well, I think renewable energy and conservation are always important issues. However, we should pursue them, but not to the extent that we endanger or risk reliability and affordability. Without reliable power, without affordable power, all this economic development effort comes to a halt.
Right.
It stops right here and there. So I think conservation, going back to Teddy Roosevelt, a champion of conservation, it's always a good thing. I support scouting. We're all about conservation of natural resources. So it is something that I think needs to be looked at, pursued, and put into place, however, not to the expense or the risk of reliable, affordable power and water.
Well, so that leads us into other conversations. Let's talk about your view on private property rights. How would you protect them? Describe your position in regarding the use of eminent domain.
Private property rights in the United States are sacred, in my view. If we start to mess with private property rights or endanger them, I think that just it starts to unravel the fabric of society. So I'm a strong private property rights advocate. I think as a council member, we become somewhat limited in the scope of our powers to protect and enforce. However, we do have zoning, we do have ordinances that we can use to protect. And should I say, I think a private property owner has the right to the quiet enjoyment of their property, which means I don't think my backyard neighbor should be able to build a water park in his backyard and have people come in. I don't think my next door neighbor should be able to turn his place into a VRBO that is nothing but a party house.
Sure.
Every weekend. So the quiet enjoyment of a person's property is foremost, and it goes back to that old thing. You know, I should be able to swing my arms in any direction so long as I don't hit your nose doing it. There have to be limits on what people can do. But as far as eminent domain, I would hope the City of Mesa learned its lesson with the Bailey Brake matter. Eminent domain, the taking of private property for quote unquote the public good, is a last resort, an absolute last resort.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Thank you for that. So can you describe the approach you take if elected to address the economic development of our community? Talk about the current efforts that are happening. Are they working? If not, how would you address them?
Well, here again, thank you for that question. I would humbly suggest that my experience is head and shoulders above my opponent's experience in this area. I think it's working well, as evidenced by the past 14 to 15 years of economic development successes.
Oh my gosh.
All we have to do is look to Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport and the surrounding areas. Mesa has a top-notch economic development team, formerly led by Bill Jevgeniak, now led by Jay O'Donnell. We are engaged at every level. We are attracting business everywhere we can attract it from, whether it be through GPEC or our own efforts. So I would say the evidence is self-evident that we're on the right track and that we should continue in that direction. And I think it's smart that we're now starting to focus more on retail, attraction of retail.
Yeah, it's time.
A source for transaction privilege tax.
Right.
We want people to not only live here, work here, but we want them to spend here as well.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Well, I think, kudos to previous leadership in our city for having the vision to put in the infrastructure that they did so many years ago.
Yes.
That has led us and enabled us to have the growth that we've had.
I think that's very true, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I think the city's been very proactive. And, as far as my involvement in this, I mentioned a few things, the Falcon Commission and Greater Phoenix Economic Council. I was honored by the International Economic Development Council a couple years ago with its International Citizen Volunteer of the Year Award.
Yeah, congratulations on that. That's a big deal.
Very honored to receive that.
Well, let's talk about your district in specifics. What do you see as your biggest challenges facing your district? District 1.
District 1, or the D1 as I like to call it, we don't...
How about the number one?
The number one. It's the number one district. That's right. We don't have, I think the city is down to about 12% of its available land overall for development, and very little of that lies within District 1.
Sure.
District 1 is a mature district. It has some very unique features. You mentioned Lehigh earlier, which I will do everything in my power to maintain the character of Lehigh.
Sure.
As
That
well
would
as
be
other
your job.
Yes, indeed, and as well as other neighborhoods. We move into neighborhoods because we like the character of the neighborhood typically, and we invest. So I think what infill is left, what redevelopment is available. We do have commercial corners that are underperforming, that are struggling. I do see some opportunity there and some things happening. Lindsay and University, the old Safeway, is becoming, I think, an EOS gym. So,
Okay.
I think we need to be creative, and council needs to give appropriate direction to city staff as to what we can do with redevelopment to revitalize struggling areas. I think our neighborhoods overall are doing well. There are some that need some help, and by help I mean you offer, you don't force.
Right.
Here's what we can do to help. Would you like that help? So I think those two things.
Okay. We'll talk about what your vision is for your district, like next 10 years. What does Lehigh and the District 1 look like in 10 years?
Well, with respect to Lehigh, I think it remains that wonderful rural character community where folks who are enjoying their horses can still ride about and take the trail all the way out to Greenfield, out to where the Mormon Crossing area is, and come back. It's a really neat area. I had the privilege of a resident down there taking me out in his four-wheeler out into the river bottom and saw all this stuff. So it's cool. But I think my vision would be thriving neighborhoods, safe parks, athletic fields for kids and adults who want to play soccer, softball, whatever your sport is. I would like District 1, as well as the city as a whole, to be a community where people want to relocate to, where people want to live, not feel like they're forced or stuck there.
Okay.
So I would envision and I have a vested interest here. My son, his new wife and grandson just recently purchased a home at Lehigh Crossing in District 1.
Oh, nice. So your neighbors almost.
Almost. Well, it'd be a little bit of a walk for me, but yeah, so I envision thriving, healthy neighborhoods that are safe and where people feel like they can get out and walk or bike or enjoy the park.
Well, talk about current city council. What do you consider the current city council's biggest success and why?
I think overall our current council has done a good job. I would look to the job creation and the economic development successes we've talked about here recently. I think that they've done a good job of being appropriately focused on public safety. Police and fire, again, outstanding organizations.
Yeah, we're very blessed.
We are extremely blessed. And when, getting back to the job creation and the economic development, when I first joined the Economic Development Advisory Board many moons ago, we talked about being a bedroom community. We talked about being a bedroom community in my days on planning and zoning. We're not a bedroom community.
Yeah, that's changed.
That's changed, and it's good. It's good. It's a good thing.
We grew up.
Yes, we did, and I think current council, several past councils, have kept their eye generally on the ball. You can always look for an area where you can improve.
Sure.
But I think overall they've done a good job.
Great. Well, are there any missed opportunities that maybe our council's, not taking advantage of? What might you have done differently if you had been on council the last 4 years?
Well, Sally, it's always easy to sit back in the bleachers and complain about every play that happens in the game.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do that because, as we just discussed, I think that overall they've done a good job. I could pick out a couple of things. I don't think I think they've struggled with the homeless issue, and I believe every member of the council has done what they feel is right. And that's really all I can ask. I don't think the hotel was the best choice, and it's not because I think we need to ignore the homeless issue. That is so close to a medical campus and a major intersection in our city that I don't think it was, going back to P&Z days, it wasn't the highest and best use.
Sure.
But I'm not going to sit here and nitpick all of those things. And it's interesting to me, every election cycle, candidates will come forward and they will talk about we need to reform and we need to renew and we need to this and we need to that. Yet the specifics never follow. Okay, reform what? Renew what? Fix what? I'm not the kind of guy that goes out looking for stuff that isn't broken and try to fix it. If I can share a real quick story.
Sure.
I met with a developer who's done a lot of work here in Mesa. And during our meeting, he excused himself for a moment and came back with a Rubik's Cube still wrapped in the cellophane. And he said, I give everyone I've decided to support one of these. And he's starting to unwrap it. And he said, because I want you to keep it and I want you to remember something. And he starts turning it around. So all the colors were lined up when it was in the paper.
Yeah.
And he turns around and he messes. See, and he says, see how neat it was when I first brought it out? Now it's all messed up. He said, the problem with elected officials is they want to fix things that aren't broken. The Rubik's Cube wasn't broken, and now look at the thing. So he said, try to remember that if you're lucky enough to get elected. So I don't think we need to try to fix everything.
Yeah.
Let's look at it and say, is it doing the job? Are the public well served? Are we using the dollars wisely? So I don't get this fix, reform, whatever. This council has done a good job. The city doesn't need to be fixed.
Yeah.
This is a good city.
It is.
And we can always improve.
Yeah.
You know, we can do something to improve every day. But it's not broken.
I love that. That's a great example. I'll think of that every time I see a Rubik's Cube now.
I do.
Let's wrap up with a last question about any issues in Mesa that you feel aren't getting enough attention.
I think housing is an issue.
Yep.
You know, housing is an issue nationally.
Yes. Yeah. I would agree, and we hear that from a lot of our larger employers that they don't have a place that some of their younger or newer employees can afford. It is an issue.
It's a problem, not just here, and I think it's something that I try to come to the table with an open mind, and I don't succeed all the time, but I try to remind myself, be willing to listen to other ideas, other creative ideas. I think it's a tragedy on a national basis that young people are being denied the opportunity for home ownership. The question we need to ask ourselves as a nation, do we want to become a nation of serfs that rent and don't own anything, or do we want to have these opportunities for people to build a life, build equity and value? So I don't know how we do that, but I think we need to keep talking about it. Valley Leadership is launched an initiative in this area. They're trying to do something about it. Doesn't matter if we all agree on it, let's talk about it.
Right.
As a good friend of mine says, let's reason together and see if we can't find an answer.
Yeah.
You know, it's...
Yeah,
so,
we are better together.
Yes.
Yeah.
So housing is an issue. The unhoused or homelessness is an issue. I get that with great compassion. But we have folks running around saying that we've got to get these people off the streets and whatever. They need to familiarize themselves with the court decisions that have tied the city's hands to some extent. It is a multifaceted problem that very few of us really understand. So again, open minds, open conversation. I do believe, bus benches, bus shelters are made for people who want to ride the bus. They are not campgrounds.
Yes, this is true.
If we want people to use public transportation, it needs to be safe.
Yes.
The Valley Metro Light Rail is not a daycare center for people who want to get out of the heat.
Right.
So these are issues we have to struggle with.
Yep.
The last one I would comment on is we need to hire more cops.
Yes, we do.
The overtime these people, these men and women that these sworn officers are working is ridiculous. And here's where it comes down to a safety thing. I've gotten to know a lot of our officers here. I was blessed with the endorsement of the Fraternal Order of Police, and I've gotten to know some of their officers, their organization's officers, as well as sworn officers. When I went through the Mesa Police Academy Class 61, one of the instructors was describing how we like to respond here in Mesa, and he says, we swarm, which means that's why we come out of all different directions. And the idea is we want to deal with hazardous situations with overwhelming force. If you have a bad guy and one officer,
Right.
that bad guy's going, I could take that guy. You have 6 officers show up,
Yeah.
you probably don't have a fight on your hands. The number of officers on duty on the street right now in these 4 districts would shock you as to how few there are. So if you have something bad go down in 2 or 3 districts at once, where's the coverage?
Right.
So, I've ridden with these people, and until you do, no one should criticize our police department until you spend a shift
Well,
at night.
so you and I have both been through the Mesa Police Citizens Academy.
Yeah.
And I would say that was one of the most educational experiences I've had since I moved to Mesa. It really was an eye-opener, and I would suggest anybody do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, because you really don't understand, and you really have no business criticizing
Right.
law enforcement unless you've stood behind the door of that patrol car while the officer deals with a
Right.
traffic stop that he thinks might be armed.
Yeah.
Okay? So,
Yeah.
So
Well,
we
tell
need
him.
more cops.
All
Plain and
right.
simple.
Well, thank you for the information. And why don't we end with you telling us how people can learn more about you and your campaign and how they can support you? Do you have a website?
I have a website, richadams4mesa.com. It's Rich Adams, RICHADAMS, the number 4, mesa.com.
Okay.
And like everyone else, my horrible campaign signs adorn all the corners in District 1. So
I've seen a few of those, yes.
you can see that. So yes, anyone that has any questions or would like to learn more, go to my website.
Okay. And can people ask you through your website for signs so they can put them out for you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I deliver.
Oh, and he delivers. Awesome. Well, thanks for your time this morning. I appreciate you coming in. And people will see a lot more from you through the chamber because you are one of our endorsed candidates. So, again, thank you. And if you have any updates, let us know.
I will do it. Thank you, Sally. It's been a great honor to receive the Chamber's endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business podcast. You can find all podcast episodes at iTunes, Spotify, or your own favorite podcast website. You can also find them online at mesachamber.org. Content of this podcast is copyright the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, unless otherwise noted.